It's Mel with the Quilting Room with Mel, and today we are starting our 2016 block of the month. Our block this month is an 8-point star. We are using Ombre Scrolls by Quilting Treasures. We have 3 different fabrics. We have our neutral, which is kind of a cream color with white scrolls. And there's a little pink in there too. We have our blue with a little bit of green, and then we have our green with a little bit of blue. Okay, and we're going to start by cutting. For all the measurements and everything, there's a link down below. Click on it. It'll have all your measurements for you, so you don't have to try to keep track of that while we're going through the block. We have our 2 strips, same width, heavily starched, and right sides together. The reason we are starching, and if you've watched any of my other videos, you know you've never seen me starch before, never heard me talk about starching. We're going to end up cutting on the bias. The starch will give us just a little bit of a safeguard so that we can leave our block, and we cannot sit down and sew it all in one time. We can leave it and come back. So let's get to cutting. I have my 2, get this one out of the way. I have my 2 strips, same width apart. I have my ruler, and on my ruler, I hope the camera can pick that up, I have lines with degrees. I have a 30-degree one, which is about where my ruler's sitting right now. I have a 45-degree one and a 60-degree one, and we're going to use the 45 right now. So I'm going to place that 45 line even with the bottom of my fabric strips. Okay. And all I'm doing is attempting to save as much fabric as possible. So I'm making sure that my edge of my ruler here is almost even with the salvage edge of my fabric. So I'm not just trying to save as much fabric there as possible. Okay, and making sure that that 45 is good. And slice. Oh, didn't push hard enough, that happens. Line everything back up. And it's probably time for a new blade in that rotary cutter. Okay, and so I have my first 45-degree angle. And now you're going to take your ruler and move over and put a line at whatever width your strip is. Our strips here are 4 inches, so I'm just going to move over to the 4-inch. Pretty easy. So I'm going to line that cut edge of my fabric with the 4, not the 5. Okay, so here's my 4-inch line right here. I have that lined up right along that cut that we just made, and I'm going to make another cut. Stubborn thread there, okay? And I'm going to leave my pair together. So I've cut a blue one and a green one together, and I'm just going to set it aside. We need 4 of those pairs. So let me show you again. Okay. Cut edge of my fabric, 4-inch line on my ruler. Line those up. If I really want to be make sure, if I'm worrying that I may be off just a little bit, I can go ahead and line that 45-degree line up on the bottom of my fabric again, and we'll make another cut. And there's 2 down. Alright. Knock those loose. Just going to make sure I line them back up. Now if you can cut one night and sew the next, I highly recommend putting a pin in each one of these so they don't move. And as you can see, off of a width of fabric, that's what I have left. I'm going to set that aside. And now I have my square. And my square is going to end up being my setting triangles. And when you sew a block together, I'm going to close that so I don't cut myself on my rotary cutter. When you finish a block, the outside of your block should be straight of grain. You don't want your bias on the outside. So to do that, we're going to put the bias on the inside. So we've got to cut this square into quarters. So I just line up corner to corner. Make a cut. Pick my ruler up. If you have a rotating mat, now's the time to pull it out. I have one. I think I'll grab it for you. So that you guys can see. I'm going to carefully yay. Not well, the one time I'm happy that the rotary cutter didn't cut all the way through so that I could put that back on. I'm going to go back in and get those threads. Okay. Now the nice thing about the rotary mat, the rotating mat, is I can just do that and cut. That way I don't have to do a left-handed cut. I'm not so great going backwards or working over myself. So that's where these rotating mats come in handy. And just like that, this is why one of those cases of do what I say, not what I do. You know, I tell you guys all the time to make sure you have fresh, sharp rotary blades in your rotary cutter, and then I don't do it. And now we have our setting triangles. And I did starch that block as well. Any place that I'm going to have bias, I starch. So now my bias is here. These will end up set in. We'll just pretend that this is sewn together. These will go in there like that. Okay. And that is all of our cutting for right now. I'm going to move my stuff over to the sewing machine and we'll get these sewn up. What you need when we get over to the sewing machine is a marking utensil. You need something to mark on your fabric. We're going to mark 1/4 inches on them. So grab that while I move over and I'll meet you at the sewing machine. Alright everyone, I am at my sewing machine and we are going to get ready to sew. The first thing we are going to do, and I know it's a little difficult to see on my table, if you look here I have a piece of painter's tape, and on the painter's tape I have a line drawn right down the middle that is in line with my needle, and then one, excuse me, a 1/4 inch away on the other side. And we need to mark, do a little marking on our fabric. So I'm going to mark on the green side, because it's a little lighter and we want to be able to see our mark. I am lining up this tip here with the, what would be my center line, because I want to measure a quarter of an inch away from that tip and draw a line. Okay. I drew a pretty hefty line. See if you bring that up so that you guys can see it. So now we're in focus. You guys can see it. I drew the line a quarter of an inch away from this tip. I'll do one more for you. And you guys have to decide which side you want to do it on. It doesn't matter as long as it is the same side for all of them. So you, like for me, all of them are going to have to be on the green side. I don't want to do half of them on the blue and half of them on the green. See, there we are. I'm a quarter of an inch. It is a big line. I'm using those Crayola markers, though, that I talked about on the blog, that they wash right out. And we are going to start. We're sewing on the side that we drew our line. We're going to start here at the tip. And we're going to sew a quarter of an inch all the way till we get to the line, and we're stopping. I'm just lining up my all the way down. I'm going pretty slow, needle down, checking. I can do another stitch, so I'm just going to reach over with my hand wheel, hit it, and I am right on that line. And here is the oddball part of this block. We're going to take some back stitches. We're actually going to lock that stitch in. As quilters, we very seldom use our lock stitch, but it works great for this, for those Y seams, and we'll talk about Y seams here in just a second, a little bit deeper. I have been watching lots of YouTube videos on the 8-point star when I decided, I want to make that block, I want to do some of that. And this was, and I know I'm going to mispronounce her name, Adinta, excuse me, Adina. See, I know I'm not saying it right. You're on YouTube anyway watching this. Look up the Fat Quarter Shop 8-point star tutorial. That is the gal. I'm using a lot of similar methods as she did. My block is just on steroids compared to the one that she did. She did a very little block. I know some of you guys don't have a lot of time to do lots and lots of blocks. I had to grab my scissors. Lots and lots of blocks to make a quilt. And this is a 17.5-inch block. It won't take you very many to do that. And of course we're doing ours as a sampler for the block of the month. So I'm going to flip my lever up, take just a couple of stitches. That's it, lock it, and I'm done. We have a technical difficulty. I got my technical difficulty taken care of. If you noticed when I pulled my block out to cut the threads, it kind of pulled. Well, I looked up and my cone was not sitting on my cone holder, and I got to looking. I'm going to blame it on the cat because I can't imagine the dog got up on my sewing table and did it. Knocked my cone off of the cone holder, and my cone of thread was underneath my sewing machine. So I got that taken care of. We're ready to sew another block. We're going to do the exact same thing on this one. Make sure I have 2 pieces. I am sewing from here down to that line that we made. So let's do that. Oh, still in reverse. There we go. Perfect. Right on the line, up the reverse, couple of stitches. I'm going to go ahead and put that back down to forward so I don't do that again. And cut our threads. Okay. Notice I'm not going to the ironing board. I'm not pressing. None of that. So I'm going to sew up my last two. So I have 4 pairs sewn together. Okay, and they all look just like this. And now it's time to press. So, get this out here where you guys can see it in the camera. I'm actually going to move the camera a little bit. There we go. So, I am not going to the ironing board. Not going to iron. I have bias. This is bias. Even though I starched it, it's still bias. So, I'm going to finger press to the left. So, I'm going to press to the green. And I'm just using my nail, making sure I keep it flat so I don't have any pockets in the front, you know, no creases in the front. It's just like if we were pressing with our ironing, our iron on the ironing board. We wouldn't want, you know, any creases in here on the front. And we are not cutting the dog ears. Leave those on. Okay, one more. I'm going to open it up. Just like that. Going to use my thumbnail to press it open. Making sure I'm not stretching the fabric, not distorting anything. Check it again. Okay, and I need to do that to all 4, and we'll be right back to sew some more. Okay, I have all 4 pressed open, and now it's time to sew them together so that we only have, we'll have our halves. Okay, so 2 pieces together gives us 4. And we are going to lock that seam at the tip. Focus so that you guys can see it. I'm locking the seam in. Hard to get my camera to focus on that little. But I'm locking these 2 seams right there. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to measure 1/4 of an inch from the tip and draw a line. Lock seams, line 1/4 of an inch, sew down that side 1/4 of an inch away. And I'm going to start my needle right on the seam from the other piece. Okay. All the way down, back stitch, and we're done. Trim your threads. Okay. Start it up here, down to my line. Okay, and again, we're not going to go see the iron. We are going to finger press this open. So I'm going to lay it down just like I did before. This is the seam in the middle that we sewed. And I'm going to finger press it to the left. To the left, to the left, to the left. And I'm going to flip it over and make sure there are no creases in my fabric. And now I cut my bunny ears, or my dog ears. I call them dog ears. But I'm always watching YouTube quilting videos, and someone was calling them bunny ears, and I'm like, oh, I kind of like it. It was around Easter time. It worked for me. It doesn't really matter what you call them. Now, it's the same thing that we just did. Part 1, part 2, together in the middle, lock the seam, just like we did. Okay, just like that. I'm locked in, but you just want to make sure those seams are butted up against each other. We are going to, let me grab my pins real quick. I thought I had them sitting over at this machine, and I didn't. They were at the other. I am going to put a pin in there so it does not move while I do the rest of this, because I've got to turn loose of it. Pin. So, again, I'm marking another 1/4 of an inch. I'm going from the tip back a 1/4, making the line. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to turn my work over. So I did it this way. I'm going to turn it over. And that's why I pinned it, so it didn't fall apart when I turned it. And I'm going to do it on the other side. And you'll find out why here in just a second. Let me draw this line. And then I'll explain all that to you, okay? Okay, so we have our lines marked. One on this side. And then one on the other side. And I'm sure you're going, don't we sew from one side to the other? We really don't. We are going to start right here where I put the pin. We're going to put our needle in there. But there is an X of our thread right about there with my fingernail. And that is where we're going to start. We're going to put our needle down there. We're going to sew to the line, do a back stitch, flip it over, go the other way. The reason we do that, I'm sure you all have sewn a long seam before. And I'm going to actually leave my presser foot up so that I can kind of see where my needle's coming down to make sure I'm in that X. And then when I'm down, I'll go ahead and put my presser foot down. Because I'm on a vintage machine, I don't have that fancy needle down button, so I have to do it by hand. But back to what I was saying. I'm sure you've all ran a long seam before, and when you get to the, they were perfect when you started, matched up, but when you get to the end, they're a little offset. This helps with that. Also, we're still on bias. These edges are bias over here. We want to make sure that nothing gets stretched or changed while we go. So, I'm going to take a couple of stitches. I have my pin in. And I'm going to back up, do a back stitch. And then I'm going to take that needle out. And we're going to just run down 1/4 of an inch seam all the way down. Stopping on that line. Back stitch a couple. Cut my threads. Flip it over. And do the exact same thing on the other side. So I'm going to find that cross. I'm going to put my needle down right in there. Drop my presser foot. Oh. Gotta remember to take it out of reverse. That's okay, we really did want to lock those in, so we're good there. All the way down. Stop on that line. Must be the power of a video camera. When I did my test blocks to work out dimensions so that I could get it the size that I wanted, I never hit that line. Ta-da! We made a star. Okay. No, it's huge. Let's see if I can back out. Oop, other way. Huge, right? Okay. And let's do the seam on the back real quick, and then we'll look at the front again. So we're gonna spin the seams. If you are a follower of Quilt in a Day, Eleanor Burns loves to spin seams. So what I'm gonna do, I'm going left. You know, all our seams are circling left, so I'm gonna just do from the center out one way, just finger press that. Make sure I don't get any creases on the front. I'm going to flip it around, do the same thing. It goes that way. Forgot which way left was. Finger press it. Okay. Then, in my center, I'm just going to kind of, and they'll spin fairly well. You just kind of follow the way the seams are pressed, and then I just kind of push it down with my finger. And we'll press that really good with an iron when we get ready for the iron. So here is the front, and I want to show you that center. Look at how nice those points come together. And that is all from locking those seams down and keeping everything pressed and going from the center out. Nothing had a chance to shift on us, so we are good there. Now it is time to fill in these spots so that we end up with the block that we're used to seeing. Time to pull out those quarter square triangles that we cut earlier. We're going to fold our block back in half. Okay, just like this. See, I'm in half. My block's bigger than my view. In half, I'm going to fold the blue side down to reveal the raw edge of the green. Get rid of that. Strings bug me. So, quarter square. Alright. In my hand. Up here. We're going to match. Point up here. Point down here. And I'm going to put a pin in. Okay, so I've got it pinned just so that we can talk for a second. Back to that marking a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to mark it from that point. Find my marker. Quarter inch. Nice big line so that I can see it. And we're going to do just like we did before. We're going to start up here. We're going to sew down to that line, back stitch it, and then we're going to flip it. This is our Y seam. Okay. We are filling in this part right here. Let me turn it around. So we're filling in this part here. And we're not going to end up with a pucker. Hopefully. No. I've done several of these now. I only puckered one. And that was the one I decided, let's see what happens if I don't starch. And I'm not real careful with my finger pressing. And I found out, it's not pretty. I had folds on the front of the fabric. So by the time I got the whole star made, things were wonky. It wasn't good. Take the time to finger press nicely. Take the time to cut well. Take the time to sew well. Because you really don't want to tear these out, rip these out. Pull the pin out. Not good to sew over those. Back stitch. And cut our threads. Okay, so this is what we have right now. So we're going to turn and sew this raw edge here to this raw edge here. So back in half. Okay, I turned it over. Okay. And this is how we are going to sew. We're going to sew from this side so that we're flat. Make sure that your fabric under here is nice and flat and not past your stitch line right there. Okay, we want to keep out because that's where we get our puckers. So we're going to put our needle in right there, right at the end of where we sewed on the line, and we're going to go down the other way. And I'm just watching to make sure my needle comes down right where I want it. I know that line's on the 1/4 inch because I drew it 1/4 of an inch from the end. So I know that's right. Take a couple stitches. And we're going to back stitch. Very important not to back stitch very far. So let's look. Pretty good. And we're going to do that to the opposite side now. Okay, so I have all my setting triangles in. And now we need to do some cleanup. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to finger press. So make sure you guys can see. Yeah, you guys can see that. We go to the star points. So I'm going to press just with my thumb again down. The point can be a little tricky. You just kind of have to feel it out. Got them finger pressed, and then we need to trim the dog ears. So I'm just going to turn that over and cut that little point off. And you're going to do that on all 4 of the triangles that you just sewn in. And that's what we have now. Nice smooth edges here. Okay, here is our block that we have right now. And we're looking more like a block, right? But we still have this big opening over here. To fill that in, we have 4 squares out of that neutral ombre. So we're just going to take one of the squares, and it's very similar to how we did the triangles. We're going to fold our block in half, just like that. I'm going to fold the green side down, just because that's how I grabbed it. Take a square. Line it up raw sides, raw edges. We're still doing that quarter, so I'm lining it up down here on my tape that has my 1/4 inch. And I'm going to make a line. And we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing. Start at one end, sew all the way to the line. When we get to the line, we're going to back stitch. Then we're going to turn it and sew the other way. So here we go. Make sure when you put this down that your seam allowance in the back is going down. We don't want to twist our seam allowance while we're sewing. Remember, if you have a point, if your block is a little long, you want to line up the point in the block. We can always deal with outside of, the outside edge not being quite right, but we cannot deal with the inside. And we want our points to be nice and as you can tell, I can't talk and concentrate at the same time, and I'm right there at my line. And we're going to cut and turn. A lot of repetitive steps. I mean, it looks very difficult, but it's not a hard block, as you can see. As long as you don't stretch those bias edges while you're putting it together, you're going to be fine. And one of the reasons we don't iron is to keep that from happening. So again, I've turned it. I've made sure my fabric back here is out so I don't pucker it. And I'm going to put my needle in on the orange line, right where I left off sewing before. Make sure you're not in back stitch mode. Take a couple of stitches. Now I am going to back stitch. And sew right down that line. Make sure you don't flip your seam allowance as you come down to the point. Let's see what we've got. Ta-da! We have it in. We need to do that to all 4 sides. Okay, we have finished our square. I hold it up behind. Nope, that doesn't work. There we go. We have finished our block. Pretty, pretty, pretty. And the last thing we do after we sew it is we give it a good press with an iron. Now we get to go play with the iron from the back side, not from the front side. Give it a good press from the back side. And that's it. You're done. Don't forget to click on the link down below to get all your cutting instructions. There will also be a sign-up sheet so that you are one of the first to find out when the next block of the month will be out. It'll be out every second Friday of every month. But in that email, you'll also get your fabric requirements, so you'll already be ready to go. Don't forget to check me out on Facebook, Home Ec with Mel, Pinterest, Home Ec with Mel, Twitter, Instagram, all of it, Home Ec with Mel. You'll find me. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below so you can check out all the other great content on my YouTube page. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll see you next time.